Before I begin, I would like to come to the defense of the Pharisees and scribes a little bit. You can imagine, in the ancient world, they all ate from one table. There was common bowls in the middle, and you just kind of took out from the bowl whatever you wanted to eat. And so here are these disciples, most of them fishermen, and they've come to dinner without washing their hands. Now, I don't know about you, but if my brothers and sisters just came from fishing and they didn't wash their hands before they reached in the bowl, I'd be a little reluctant to reach in there myself. So it's a very practical thing they're doing. And I think Jesus understands this, which is why he's talking to just the Pharisees and scribes, and then after he gives them his little lesson on about washing hands and stuff, then he calls the crowd together to make his point. And so, just to relax that a little and think if we ourselves would have that same issue. When I was in the seminary, often seminarians who would be future priests would be labeled. We kind of go through and label, well, this one's that and that one's that. I never did that, but all these other guys did, okay? And they would label them and they'd say, well, that one's so rigid because he's interested in the laws of the liturgy and the laws of the church and the magisterium, but he doesn't care anything for the poor. So he's a conservative, he's traditional. And on the other end, they'd say, oh, they're progressive or they're liberal because they care very much about the poor, but they don't care anything about the laws of the church or the magisterium or celebrating good liturgy with reverence and everything else. And so we compartmentalized people. And I imagine if you do that in the seminary, that the people of God can do that as well in a religious instance. And yet I don't think the two are exclusive. I think we're supposed to be both and, not one and the other. I usually don't preach on the psalm, but the psalm today is so powerful, and so I want to read through it once for you. The one who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Whoever walks blamelessly and does justice, who thinks the truth in his heart. So the one who's obedient to the laws of God, the one who adheres to the church and slanders not with his tongue, who harms not his fellow man nor takes up reproach against his neighbor, by whom the reprobate is despised, while he honors those who fear the Lord. So I must love my neighbor as myself. So we have both ends of the spectrum here. Who lends not his money at usury and accepts no bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things shall never be disturbed. So we're called to obey the teachings of the church and adhere to the magisterium of the church. We're also called to care for the poor and those who cannot care for themselves. We must do both and. So even if we look at the second reading from James in the Gospel, it all really speaks to this, that we have to be both. There is a document by the bishops called Economic Justice for All, and in it it reads, central to the biblical presentation of justice is that the justice of a community is measured by its treatment of the powerless in society, most often described as the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the stranger in the land. It goes on to say, decisions must be judged in light of what they do for the poor, what they do to the poor, and what they enable the poor to do for themselves. And so when the psalmist says one who does justice, it's talking about a social justice, an obligation that we have to God and our neighbor to take care of those who cannot care for themselves, to take care and be the voice of those who are the voiceless. St. James says, be doers of the word and not hearers only, deluding yourself. James is big on this. He's like, if you just have faith and you don't have works, what good is it? So show me that you have faith. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to care for orphans and widows in their affliction and keep oneself unstained by the world. And so this is social justice, that we take care of the poor who cannot help themselves. We take care of the elderly, especially those who are being mistreated. We take care of the orphans or the ones without a voice, the unborn. We have to be spokespeople for these individuals. So how do we do this? Because back in the day, he says take care of widows and orphans. That's not really a big concern of ours in this day and age. Back then, you had the mother taking care of the children while the father was the support system for the family. If the father died and the woman was a widow, she had no support system. She was essentially dead. She had nothing. And because she had nothing, she couldn't nearly take care of her children, so they often became street children or orphans. So this was a major problem, especially in occupied territory where these Jews were being killed by Romans, where work took its toll on people, etc., etc. So who are our orphans and widows? Well, we have many poor, even living in our own area here. So how are we supposed to take care of them? How do we take care of widows and orphans? We take care of them by empowering them, not enabling them, empowering them, just as Jesus did. That's how we learn how to treat them. So we need to be both and. We need to adhere to what the church teaches and at the same time care for the poor. I recall one day, it was before I entered the seminary, I had a business. And I was doing business with the University of Pennsylvania down in Philadelphia. And as I went down there, I got off the exit and there was a man holding a cardboard sign that read, "We'll work for food." And so I had some wooden plaques in the back of my truck, and I decided, okay, I'll let him sand down these plaques while I have my meeting, and then I'll pay him something. So I pulled over the car and I offered him this deal. And he said to me, "Today's my day off." I wonder if tomorrow was his day off too, if you know what I mean. Now, I don't want to be cynical about this, but the fact is, we've been approached many times at the rectory. Someone will come and they say, "We need food, and can you give us some money to get food or a card or whatever?" And I offer to make them food. We'll put something together for you. And they don't want that. They want the money. That at times, and I've heard this story so many times, they will come here with some need, and when we've actually given something in the past, they will actually tie a plastic bag to the door to show that we gave something so that the others can come by. They see that marker and they know that they're going to get help. So how can we do this without enabling people to steal from the poor that really actually need it? Well, in our church here, in the area actually, we have a wonderful organization. So between St. Vincent de Paul Society and the food bank, they have a wonderful system to vet the people who really need help. So what happens is, if someone comes to you for personal help, or they're outside the church and they need help, we refer everyone to St. Vincent de Paul, because we actually spend money on that. We give them money to do this for us. And what often happens, if someone needs a gas card or a food card or what have you, they will recommend that they go to the police station. And the police station has these gas cards, but first you have to get a little background check. Now this vets out about half of the people who might normally take advantage of the system. If there's nothing really to hide, then you go there, and quite frankly, the police can give you more help than we can, probably. So that's one way that we do this. We use the St. Vincent de Paul Society and the food bank to give people the help they need, to empower them to be the people they can be. You know, you heard that. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, etc., etc. We have the parish outreach program, which through kindness of works and kindness of goods, furniture and things like that, we've not only been able to help our sister parish in Kentucky or Haiti, but we've been able to help local flood victims here as well. So we have these opportunities to give, but we have to be careful how we give, because we do not want to enable evil to occur. I remember in the seminary we had a mixed number of people from different nations and countries, and whenever we talked about giving to the poor, the Africans would get so angry with us. And in fact, my buddy from Uganda, and here's a shout out to you, Alexandrua, my buddy from Uganda, he would say, "Tell your government to stop sending us aid. Stop sending us tractors. Stop sending us infrastructure, because it goes to the warlords and then they rent it out to us." So here the warlords, the people in power, are getting more money and they're oppressing the people more. So how do we do it? He said, give it to the Catholic organizations who are on the ground there. They make sure we get the help, they make sure we get the money and whatever we need. But please just be so prudent because you're enabling these warlords to get richer because we have to rent the things from them. In other words, they find a way to use it. And so we are called to give to help the poor, but we have to be smart about it. We do not want to enable people. We want to empower them. I've had a number of people that I visit for communion calls or in the hospital, and they're on a fixed income. Many of them are elderly, and they get so frustrated and they feel so guilty because all these organizations send them envelopes for donations. And they feel like, well, I can't give to one without giving to another. Yes, you can. If you're on a fixed income, you don't want to starve yourself or, neglect yourself because you're not giving. Give to a few of them. You can't give to all of them. So again, we have to be smart about this. We take care of the poor. We are advocates for the unborn and for the elderly. But we have to be very careful that we're not enabling people. Sometimes it's easy to send a check. It's a lot harder to get involved. And so one other issue, and I'm going to bring this up only at this particular Mass, the 10:30. I don't know how many of you are regular 10:30 people, but you know that we have the Milton Hershey students who come here for Sunday worship. They're the Catholic students. Now you know how hard it is to get your kids to come to Mass. Imagine if they were already at a service for an hour, and then they come here for another hour. How tough that is. So these kids that come here, I feel terrible for them because they're squirming and they're talking and they've already been in church for an hour and they come here again. So I'd ask any people, talk about social justice. They're not orphans. They have families here and they have families, at their normal home. But right now they're strangers in this land. They're not used to this area. And so if anyone is willing to sit with these children during Mass, that would be a great help. It reduces the temptation when they're sitting next to each other to talk to each other. It reduces the temptation that when they go to the bathroom, they go AWOL. I think a man-to-man defense is much better than a zone in this area, if you know what I mean. So if you'd be willing to do that, please call me or leave your name and number at the office, and we'll work something out. We have people in charge of this, but it is awfully overwhelming. Another way that we can help our own within this community, that's social justice. That's what we're called to do. I think what happens so often is we fall into 6 traps, 6 fallacies, that we want to, show this social justice, but we realize, I have to be in this camp or this camp. No, we don't. We can be both and. And how do we do this? We learn from the Master. Jesus was big on the poor and the widows and the orphans. He was big on social justice. But he also believed everything that the Father told him. That he also adhered to the laws of the church. And so just to go through 6 of these traps I think we fall into. The first one is, Jesus was humble. And when he engaged in a debate, he was very civil. He didn't demonize the person. He didn't turn it hateful. He didn't yell and scream. He didn't vandalize, all this other stuff. What he did was he spoke civilly to these people, and because of that honey, he attracted a lot more flies than the vinegar. At times he spoke the truth with conviction, but it was always with charity. And I think sometimes we think our cause is so great that we have to be nasty or we have to get in people's faces or, Jesus acted in civil discourse, and he made great inroads because of that. I think the second trap that we fall into sometime is that our life doesn't match what we're trying to do. So you might have someone who is for a cause, and they're the poster child for this cause, but in their own personal life there's absolute chaos. Or they don't care about their personal life. My personal life doesn't matter. What I do on my own time is my business. The cause is the most important thing. Jesus wasn't like that. His cause was the gospel, and he lived it. So he wasn't going to tell us to do something that he himself did not act out in his own life. And we fall into this trap sometimes where we're pushing for the cause, but all the other causes really don't matter, or all the other norms really don't matter. I think the third trap we fall into is that we believe because we're into social justice and the poor, that the church doesn't matter, or that the magisterium doesn't matter, or that there's room for flexibility within the morality of the church. Jesus never did that. He always referred and deferred to the Father. And even when he's dealing with the Sanhedrin, even when he's dealing with the Pharisees and scribes, he says they sit on the chair of Moses, do whatever they tell you, but don't do what they do. But do what they tell you. That he followed the teachings of the church. Jesus was God. He never sinned, but he made the sin offering every year. Jesus was baptized. He had no need of baptism. Jesus went to the temple to worship. He had no need to worship. He's God. He adhered to these laws of the church. And I think sometimes we say, well, I'm doing this good, so that is above the law of the church, so to speak. Jesus, the fourth trap, Jesus was less interested in the short-term rewards, more interested in the big picture. He wasn't interested in winning the battles, he was looking at the war. And the war was for salvation. And I believe sometimes when we are putting forth our cause, that our cause is the only thing that matters. So we want to get converts, we want to have numbers, but we're just thinking about the cause. Our cause should be the salvation of everyone. That we're working, that one day when we get to heaven, God willing, that we will have everyone here with us. That's why we're pushing the truth. It's not that I want to get converts. It's not that I want to get credit, that I want to be a founder or anything else. It's that we want everyone to be with us in heaven. Jesus had the big picture in mind, and salvation was the goal. And the apostles had to learn that. You know, sometimes James and John are saying, Lord, should we call down fire upon them? Or, you know, they had to learn these things. But Jesus was the master instructor. The fifth trap that we fall into sometimes is embellishments or lies, just downright lies. Jesus never lied. And so yes, he wanted to spread the gospel, but he wasn't willing to sin to do that. He wasn't willing to skew statistics or to take a slant on something or to embellish or enhance it and say, well, the truth is worth it. I want these people to be saved so much that I'm willing to lie for it, or that I'm willing to skew these statistics a little bit because it's for the greater good. No. We don't need to defend the truth. The truth's like a lion in the cage. Just open the cage. That's all we have to do. The truth will defend itself. And so we cannot skew the information one way or the other, because then we lose credibility. If we honestly want to promote the truth, just open the cage and be honest. We need to have that integrity, because if we don't, then they will look at our life and what we're doing to promote the gospel will be empty. Finally, Jesus never put himself above the law. And he was in an unjust government. I mean, they were occupied by Rome. Of course it was unjust. They didn't elect those individuals. And yet he never put himself above that. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's. That he was not inciting the people toward a rebellion. He was worried about the big picture, their salvation. Occupiers come and go. The Israelites had been slaves on and off for most of their life, so they had known this. The big picture is salvation. As opposed to Barabbas. Remember, Barabbas was a revolutionary, and his cause was freedom from the Romans. He was an Israelite, but all that didn't matter. His cause was freedom for the Romans, the short term. Interestingly, in the gospel, it says that Barabbas' first name was Jesus. Now, Jesus was a common name there. Yeshua, Joshua was pretty common. But his name was Jesus Barabbas. Barabbas means the son of the Father. Isn't it ironic that Jesus, the Son of the Father, was released, and that Jesus, the true Son of the Father, was crucified, which made salvation possible for us? He was not above the law. He was humble, and he yielded to that. And because of that, he not only garnered followers, but followers who would be martyrs. You see, we are called toward a social justice. We are responsible for our brothers and sisters in Christ because they are also made in the image and likeness of God. But we are also responsible to be faithful Catholic Christians. Just as Jesus did both and, so we are called to do that. You know, so often we look at the poor and we want to extend social justice. We want to be in solidarity with the poor. But the thing that we're missing, the thing that probably is most necessary, is the poor in spirit.